Assalamu alaikum. Peace be unto you. Good evening. Thank you for everybody for sitting through the lengthy fundraising. Very important to the organization. Before I begin our discussion tonight, I want to give you some good news. The day before the election, on Tuesday, there were 11 members of Congress who routinely used anti-Muslim stereotypes in their conversations on Capitol Hill. In January, 4 of them will not be returning to Congress. Alan West from Florida claims Islam is not a religion, and he asserts that Muslims are a fifth column. He's not going back to Congress. I want you to be assured that Muslims played a strong role in making sure that electoral defeat happened. Similarly, Illinois' Joe Walsh, who cast suspicion on all Muslims, and Minnesota's Chip Kravac, who called one of the nation's leading American Muslim organizations a terrorist organization, will not be going back to Congress. Finally, there's Sue Myrick of North Carolina, one of my personal favorites. She retired. A few years ago, she held a press conference where she alleged that Muslim interns on Capitol Hill were spies. You may also recall her 2003 warning that a previously unknown security threat because, in her words, you know, look at who runs all the convenience stores across the country. Every little town you go into, you know? Is that one of the security threats we're facing, guys? We were talking about that earlier. Not to my knowledge. Convenience stores. Good one. I have another piece of good news for you. Islam's favorability rating last time it was polled in 2010 stood at 30%. So how's that good news? As of August 2012, Congress's favorability rating is 10%. You're still more popular than Congress, guys. So we're here tonight because we're among those, the American Muslim community in particular, and that's what I'm talking to right now, are on the front lines of those who are defending the Constitution. We're defending it from people who, selling anti-Muslim stereotypes and fear, seek to return America to a legal system that treats one group of Americans as different from all of the others. Worse, if you pay attention to the Islamophobes like Pamela Geller and David Yerushalmi, there are those who appear to be seeking to give rebirth to South African apartheid, except with religion as its new target. That's kind of a strong statement, and give me a moment, I'll prove it to you. First, let's look at efforts to legislate government-sanctioned discrimination against Muslims. You heard a little bit about it in the video. 2011-2012, 78 bills or amendments aimed at interfering with Islamic religious practices were introduced in 31 states and the United States Congress. 62 of these bills contained language that was extracted from Islamophobe David Yerushalmi's American Laws for American Courts legislation. Now, if you do an internet search of David Yerushalmi, on the first page of your results, you'll see his claims or his call for a war against Islam and all the Muslim faithful. You will also see his anti-woman, anti-black, and other biased comments on your first page. So I would just assert to you that there's reason to be concerned that a man who is so central to hate in this country can influence legislators at the state level. 73 of the bills I'm talking about were introduced solely by Republicans, and I'm not just talking fringe legislators. I'm talking far too often people who were involved in party leadership. These bills were signed into law in Arizona, Kansas, South Dakota, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. I want you to be very clear. They always talk about Sharia. They're defending the country from Sharia. This is a cover term. It's a cover for anti-Muslim sentiment. I have no doubt about it. In Tennessee, the original bill's definition of Sharia was actually, in practical terms, the entire faith of Islam. It said that Sharia encompasses all content taken from any of the authoritative schools of Islam, and it names Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali, Jafariya, and, just for kicks, adds Salafi. Any imam in the room, how many schools of thought are there in Islam? 4 in Sunni Islam, right? So essentially what they just said is Sharia is everything. So they were attempting to make being a Muslim illegal in the state of Tennessee. South Dakota anti-Islam bill sponsor Phil Jensen told an audience, this is a direct quote, "It is alarming how many of our sisters and daughters who attend American universities are now marrying Muslim men." So we got an anti-Islam bill. In Pennsylvania, the bill itself made no mention of Islam. However, in a memo to all House members, urging them to co-sponsor the bill, Representative Rosemary Swanger falsely claimed that Sharia is inherently hostile to our constitutional liberties. Later, pulling back from that position, Swanger claimed she had no idea how the memo was going to be written and claimed that it was never circulated. She also said that it was leaked by someone who was not my friend. But that strains credibility because I found the memo with her signature on the website of the Pennsylvania legislature. So it got circulated and it had your signature on it later. So I think I've already made the point. You might have already taken this conclusion. A lot of these guys don't know what they're talking about. So let's talk a little bit about that and see what it is that these guys are saying about us. The Star Assistant in Alabama reported no one, not even Senator Gerald Allen, who sponsored the bill, could point to examples of Muslims trying to have Islamic law recognized in Alabama courts. That's the pattern. Allen couldn't even define Sharia what Sharia is, when he was asked. What he told the reporter to do is to go ahead and talk to his legislative staff. So the reporter did. And the reporter asked his legislative staff a pretty simple question. Why does your definition of Sharia look like the one I just found on Wikipedia? You know what they said? That's because it is from Wikipedia. So, I know there's a university in this town. College students, you tell me, can you use Wikipedia in your papers? No? Yes? Maybe? No? However, it seems to be good enough for some legislators. In Texas, Leo Berman said his bill was necessary because he had heard, but not apparently bothered to confirm, that one American town was allowing judges to use Sharia. This is what he said. I heard it on a radio station here on my way to the Capitol one day. I don't know Dearborn, Michigan, but I heard it, Sharia law is accepted there, on the radio. Isn't that true? I mean, don't you bother to check before you introduce a bill, guys? The Kansas City Star reported that the Missouri representatives Paul Kurtman and Don Wells also agreed there was no evidence that state courts were using Sharia law. So the reporter went back to Kurtman a month later and said, well, have you got any examples? And Kurtman, a month later, was still unable to provide any examples. In Missouri, same thing. Speaker of the House, Stephen Tilley, could not provide a single example of foreign law trumping domestic law in Missouri courts. His office did later issue a statement outlining one case in New Jersey. That case was a really poor ruling. Anybody who's familiar with it knows it got no support from Muslim organizations because essentially the gentleman in the case went into court and tried to argue that it was his right under our faith to rape his wife. I don't think there's any Muslim in this room that would accept that as true. And so the ruling was rightfully overturned by a higher court. That's the way our courts are supposed to work, right? Sometimes judges make bad calls, other judges overrule them. So the news here is fairly straightforward. Yes, they've passed anti-Islam laws in 6 states. Yes, they'll try again in 2013. But if we here, in this room, commit to upholding the Constitution, we can preserve civil liberties. And CARE's been at the forefront of doing that work on these pieces of legislation. The Constitution is the law of the land. We like it that way. We agree with people of the Jewish and Catholic faiths who already have established tradition using religious mediation, sometimes to form legal deals that within the law We are free to make choices in accordance with our faith. In accordance with Islam, my marriage contract required me to pay a mahr to my wife. What that is, essentially, is a prenup where the lady in the agreement gets money in advance of the wedding. She is allowed to do whatever she wants to do with that. So I don't know why anybody would have any complaints about that. In accordance with Islam, my home financing involves no interest. Guys, by the way, one of those groups is outside. Talk to them. Interest-free loans are pretty cool. Similarly, my financial investment strategy avoids me putting money into gambling, pornography, and weapons manufacturing. So I have no idea why anyone would treat that as a threat to American democracy. Let's talk about CAIR's lawsuit in Oklahoma. We filed a lawsuit when Oklahoma in 2010 passed one of these anti-Islam bills. We filed a lawsuit 2 days later in which we argued that the law violates the First Amendment, which says that Congress can't establish any laws that favor one religion or vilify another religion. That applies to the states as well as the federal government. We also argued the Supremacy Clause. It says that the Constitution, highest law of the land, nothing can supplant it. To date, 4 federal judges have ruled in our favor because we have attorneys like set out for us. The interesting thing, though, is that even though we have 4 federal judges ruling in our favor and the law is on hold, people say, you guys are trying to overthrow the Constitution. You're trying to subvert it. So I'm still trying to work this out. Maybe you guys can help me with it. They pass a bill that on its face violates the First Amendment, which means that undermines the Constitution, right? We file a lawsuit arguing First Amendment and Supremacy Clause, but we're the ones who are somehow subverting the Constitution. I argue to you again, Muslims are on the front lines of defending the Constitution. In Minnesota, the legislator who was going to introduce an anti-Islam bill pulled it 2 hours after a CAIR-led press conference. In New Jersey, after Muslim leaders joined with CAIR and other interfaith groups to oppose the bill, the legislator met with those groups and pulled it. Same thing in states around the country. Pennsylvania, Florida. I got to think about Florida because that was a long and difficult struggle, but we were eventually able to get the bill stopped. All around the country, CAIR has been joining with our Jewish partners, with our Christian partners to get these bills defeated. So that's one example of us being at the front line of upholding the Constitution. Here's another one. Let's talk about the election, right? Nobody in the room is sick about the election yet, right? Everybody still having fun with it? Good. So Herman Cain, you guys remember him? He was a front runner for a while for GOP's presidential nomination. Speaking to Christianity Today in March 11th, 2011, Cain said followers of the Muslim religion have an objective to convert all infidels or kill them. Cain also said that any Muslim who wants to serve in his administration would have to take a loyalty oath. He explained to Fox News host Glenn Beck that he would not require similar oaths from Mormons or Catholics because there is a greater, dangerous part of the Muslim faith than there is in these other religions. So I know we have at least one attorney in the room. Hopefully you get 2. Article 6 of the United States Constitution says there will be no religious test for public office. No loyalty oaths, folks. Your faith actually doesn't matter. Your merit to do your job is what matters. So we have a front runner on stage saying that he will make people take loyalty oaths and indeed undermining the Constitution while he's doing so. Was he thrown off the stage for that? He got applause. People clapped.